If Iran decides to strike back in a serious way, it wouldn't be chaotic or random. It would be carefully planned and highly coordinated. This isn't about firing a single missile just to make a statement. It's about creating a situation where multiple things happen at once, fast enough that defenses struggle to keep up. One of the key strategies would likely involve combining different types of attacks at the same time. Ballistic missiles could be launched from long distances. At the same time, drones could be deployed in large numbers, not just to hit targets, but to confuse and overwhelm defense systems. Because modern defense systems are strong, but they're not unlimited. If too many threats appear at once, especially from different directions and at different speeds, it becomes much harder to intercept everything. Some get stopped, but some can get through, and that's where the real impact comes from. Another important part of coordination is timing. These attacks wouldn't happen randomly throughout the day. They would likely be synchronized, launched within minutes of each other to create maximum pressure all at once. That kind of timing reduces reaction windows. Decision-makers don't get much time to assess what's happening before they have to respond. And in high-pressure situations like that, even advanced systems and trained teams can be pushed to their limits. There's also the element of targeting strategy. Instead of focusing on just one location, coordinated strikes are often spread across multiple points. This forces defenses to divide attention and resources, increasing the chances that at least some targets are successfully hit. And beyond the physical damage, there's a psychological effect. When multiple strikes happen together, it creates a sense of intensity and scale. It signals capability, preparation, and control, showing that this isn't a reaction driven by emotion, but a move that was planned in advance. That kind of message is meant to influence not just the immediate opponent, but everyone watching, including the United States. Because in a situation like this, how a response is delivered can be just as important as the response itself. If a larger response unfolds, it likely wouldn't be limited to a single location. The pattern would point toward simultaneous pressure across several areas, stretching defenses and attention at the same time. Instead of focusing on one base or one city, targets could be spread out, different sites, different countries, different directions. That kind of spread forces decision-makers to divide resources quickly, making it harder to fully protect every point at once. Geography plays a big role here. The region has a dense network of military installations, supply routes, and strategic hubs connected to the United States and its partners. When pressure is applied across multiple locations, even well-prepared systems can feel the strain, simply because there are more points to monitor, defend, and respond to all at once. There's also the advantage of distance and angles. If actions originate from different areas, they don't all approach from the same direction or at the same speed. That variation complicates tracking and interception because defenses have to adapt in real time rather than rely on a single, predictable pattern. Another layer is sequencing. Events might not all occur at the exact same second. Some could happen almost simultaneously, while others follow shortly after. That staggered timing keeps attention shifting, preventing a full reset between incidents and maintaining constant pressure over a longer window. Communication becomes more difficult under those conditions. Information comes in from multiple places at once: reports, alerts, confirmations. And teams have to sort through it quickly to understand what's real, what's urgent, and what requires immediate action. Even small delays or misinterpretations can affect how effectively a response is organized. There's also a broader signal being sent. By demonstrating reach across different locations, it shows capability beyond a single point of action. It communicates that responses aren't confined to one area and that the situation can expand in scope whenever needed. And as more locations come into play, the number of variables increases. More responses, more movements, more reactions, making the overall situation harder to predict and control, especially as it continues to evolve in real time. If the situation escalates further, one of the most critical shifts would be the activation of regional allies connected to Iran. And this is where things become far more complex than a direct, one-on-one conflict. Iran's influence doesn't stop at its own borders. Over the years, it has built relationships and networks across different parts of the region, groups that are aligned politically, strategically, and in some cases, militarily. That creates a layered structure of response options. So instead of responding only from within Iran itself, pressure can be applied from multiple directions through these connections. And that changes the entire battlefield. Because now it's not just about where the main conflict is happening, it's about where it could expand next. Different groups in different regions may choose to act in ways that support Iran's position, whether that means targeting strategic assets, increasing pressure in key areas, or creating disruptions that pull attention away from the primary front. This creates a multi-front dynamic. Instead of one central conflict zone, multiple areas can become active at the same time. Each front may vary in intensity, but together, they stretch resources and focus much thinner than a single conflict ever could. There's also an element of unpredictability here. Not every move would come directly from Iran's command structure in a visible way. Some actions could appear indirect or loosely connected, which makes it harder to immediately determine responsibility or intent. And that uncertainty complicates response decisions. Because reacting too quickly or too strongly in one area might escalate another, while holding back might create openings elsewhere. Another important factor is timing and coordination. These groups don't all have to act at once. Activity can be staggered, creating waves of pressure rather than a single surge. That keeps the situation constantly shifting, making it harder to stabilize. At the same time, this kind of networked response sends a broader message that the situation isn't isolated. It shows that escalation doesn't stay contained within one set of borders or one direct exchange. It has the potential to ripple outward, activating different layers of involvement across the region. And as more actors become part of the equation, the situation naturally becomes harder to control, harder to predict, and far more difficult to manage in a straightforward way. One of the fastest ways this situation could impact everyday life in the United States and beyond is through energy disruption. And it doesn't take a full shutdown to create serious consequences. The Middle East sits at the center of global oil flow, and a key part of that system is the Strait of Hormuz. A significant portion of the world's oil passes through this narrow route every single day. Because it's so concentrated, even a small disruption can have an outsized effect. If tensions rise and this route becomes threatened, whether through direct action, increased military presence, or even just perceived risk, shipping traffic can slow down almost immediately. And markets react fast. Oil prices don't wait for confirmation. They respond to uncertainty. Even the possibility of disruption can push prices higher within hours. That increase then moves quickly through the system. Fuel costs start rising. Transportation becomes more expensive. Shipping costs go up. And once that happens, it doesn't stay limited to energy. It spreads into everyday goods, groceries, deliveries, manufacturing, because so much of the economy depends on transportation. A small increase at the source can ripple outward into multiple industries. There's also a timing issue. Energy systems rely on consistency. When supply becomes uncertain, companies and governments start adjusting, stockpiling, rerouting, or securing alternative sources. Those adjustments create additional pressure, sometimes even before any actual shortage occurs. At the same time, insurance costs for shipping in high-risk areas can increase sharply. If routes are considered dangerous, fewer ships may be willing to pass through, or they may require higher compensation to do so. That further tightens supply and adds another layer of cost. And beyond the numbers, there's a psychological effect on markets. Investors and institutions respond to risk quickly, often pulling back or shifting resources to safer areas. That can lead to volatility not just in energy, but across financial systems as well. All of this can happen rapidly, not over months, but sometimes within days or even hours, because the global energy network is so interconnected and sensitive to disruption. If the situation reaches a point where a serious attack occurs, the United States wouldn't have the option to simply observe or stay on the sidelines. At that stage, the pressure to respond becomes immediate and unavoidable. There are multiple reasons for that. First, there's the direct impact. If U.S. personnel, bases, or strategic assets are targeted, whether inside the region or connected to operations there, it triggers a responsibility to act. Not responding would raise serious concerns about security and deterrence. Second, there's the message it sends globally. The United States operates as a major global power, and its actions are constantly being watched by allies and rivals alike. If a significant attack happens and the response is limited or delayed, it can be interpreted as hesitation. That perception alone can influence future actions by other actors. Then there's the alliance factor. The U.S. has strong strategic ties with countries like Israel, and support isn't just political. It includes military coordination, intelligence sharing, and defense commitments. If those allies are directly affected, the expectation for U.S. involvement increases even more. That creates a situation where the decision isn't just about one event, it's about maintaining credibility across multiple relationships. Another important layer is the type of response. It wouldn't necessarily jump straight to the largest possible action. There are levels: targeted strikes, defensive operations, expanded presence, all designed to send a signal while trying to manage escalation. But even a limited response carries risk, because once action is taken, it opens the door for a counter-response. And that back and forth can begin to build momentum quickly, especially if both sides feel the need to demonstrate strength. At the same time, internal pressure plays a role. Decisions are influenced by security advisors, military leadership, and political expectations. There's often a demand for a clear and decisive response, especially when national interests are involved, and those decisions have to be made quickly. There isn't always time for long deliberation when events are unfolding in real time. That urgency increases the chances of actions being taken under pressure, where the focus is on immediate response rather than long-term consequences. As more resources are committed, whether troops, equipment, or operations, the level of involvement deepens. And with each step, it becomes harder to scale things back, because disengaging after escalation can carry its own risks. If escalation continues, one of the most serious outcomes is how quickly the situation could expand beyond a regional conflict and pull in multiple global players at once. At the center of it, you have the United States, Iran, and Israel. But none of these operate in isolation. Each one has alliances, partnerships, and strategic relationships that can activate under pressure. And once those connections start coming into play, the scale begins to shift. Allied countries may step in to provide support, sometimes through military presence, sometimes through logistics, intelligence, or defense systems. Even if they're not directly involved in combat, their participation still increases the overall intensity of the situation. At the same time, rival powers are watching closely. Any major escalation creates an opportunity to adjust influence, test boundaries, or reposition strategically. That doesn't always mean direct involvement, but it adds another layer of tension, because more interests are now tied to how the situation unfolds. Another factor is how quickly global systems react. Financial markets, supply chains, and international trade networks are all connected. When uncertainty increases at this level, reactions happen almost instantly. Investors shift positions, currencies fluctuate, and trade routes can become less stable. That kind of instability spreads fast. And then there's the risk of overlapping responses. Different countries may act based on their own priorities, timelines, and interpretations of events. Those actions don't always align perfectly, which can create confusion or unintended consequences. In high-pressure environments, even small miscommunications can lead to larger reactions. A defensive move by one country might be seen as offensive by another. A precautionary deployment might be interpreted as preparation for escalation. And once those interpretations start to differ, the chances of miscalculation increase. There's also the broader strategic balance to consider. When multiple powerful nations become involved, directly or indirectly, the situation becomes less about a single conflict and more about maintaining global positioning. Each move is weighed not just for immediate impact, but for how it affects long-term influence. That makes decisions more complex and sometimes more aggressive, because no side wants to appear at a disadvantage. And as more actors, interests, and responses enter the picture, the situation becomes harder to manage in a controlled way. What started as a focused conflict begins to evolve into something much wider, with multiple layers unfolding at the same time.